All right, ready to dive into some seriously deep philosophical waters today. We're tackling Emmanuel Levinas and his mind-bending work, Totality and Infinity.
Is going to be good.
It is. And don't worry, we'll unpack the jargon so we can all actually use Levinas's ideas to see the world and, each other in a whole new light.
Because that's the thing about Levinas, right? He isn't just some philosopher stuck in an ivory tower. He wants his ideas to hit us right where it matters in our guts. He wants to shake up how we understand what it means to exist in the first place. And a big part of that is this idea of totality.
Okay, yeah, let's start there then. Totality. Sounds kind of, I don't know, intimidating, like a lot to wrap our heads around.
It is. Think of it this way. Imagine you're trying to understand absolutely everything, the whole universe, but you're only allowed to use, like, the laws of physics. You'd miss so much, right?
Totally. I mean, where's the art, the love, a good cup of coffee?
Exactly. That's kind of what Levinas is getting at with this whole totality thing. He's saying that philosophy, at least how it's traditionally been done, tries to cram the entire universe into this neat little box, this system that we've created. And Levinas says that's where things go wrong.
So he's saying we can't just think our way to a complete understanding of everything. There's more to it than that.
You got it. There's always something more, something that escapes our attempts to put it in the box, label it, control it, and that something more is what Levinas calls the other.
Ooh, okay, now we're getting mysterious. The other. I like it. Is he talking about, like, aliens or something?
Not quite. Think about those moments when you encounter something so vast, so unknowable that it just blows your mind a little. Like gazing up at the night sky and realizing just how small we are.
Or connecting with a complete stranger and feeling like there's this whole depth to them you could never fully grasp.
Bingo. That feeling. That's the other, disrupting our tidy little systems of thought. And Levinas says the most powerful way we experience this is in a face-to-face encounter with another person.
It's true. It's like no matter how well you think you know someone, there's always this mystery to them. You can never truly know everything about another person.
Exactly. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a problem to solve. It's actually the starting point for ethics. Recognizing that the other person, simply by existing, is fundamentally different from us. They have their own thoughts, their own experiences that we can never fully access.
Whoa. So he's saying ethics isn't about following a set of rules, but about how we approach this fundamental otherness we see in other people.
You're catching on quick. For Levinas, ethics isn't just one part of philosophy. It's the foundation, the ground we stand on. Before any system of thought, there's this responsibility we have to the other person just because they exist.
Okay. That's a pretty radical idea. It's like he's flipping the script on its head. Instead of asking, how should I act? He's saying, pay attention. The fact that other people exist, that already demands something of you.
Right. And what it demands isn't something easy to define. It's not about following a checklist. It's about treating the other person not as an object, something to be figured out or controlled, but as a being worthy of respect, of dignity, simply because they are.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So we've got this totality, this vastness we can't contain. We've got the other who's always there, shaking things up, reminding us we can't know everything. But where does the infinity part come in? It's in the title of his book, after all.
You're ready to go even deeper. That's where things get really wild. Levinas says that the truly other, this force that's always exceeding our grasp, is actually infinite. We can never fully define it, contain it with our finite little minds.
So we're not talking about, like, infinity as in endlessness of space or something?
Nope. Levinas is saying we experience infinity in the face of the other, in that encounter that leaves us kind of breathless, humbled, and that experience right there, that's ethics. It's this call to responsibility, this reminder that we never truly possess another human being, even if we try to.
Okay, we are in the deep end now. We're talking about rethinking reality itself, how we understand ethics, even what it means to be a self.
We are. And that's what makes Levinas so challenging, but so incredibly important.
Okay, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, there's still a lot to unpack here. Like, if we're not just these fixed, isolated individuals, then what does Levinas say about how we understand who we are? And how does this whole new view of ethics actually play out in our lives, day to day?
Those are fantastic questions, and they lead us to some of the most profound and, dare I say, practical aspects of Levinas's work.
Well, I'm intrigued. Let's keep going then. So last time, we left off trying to wrap our heads around encountering the infinite in other people, which I gotta say is a pretty wild thought to chew on.
It is.
But before we get lost in space, How about we bring things back down to earth for a minute?
Sounds good to me.
How does this Levinas guy connect all these big ideas to our everyday lives, to, like, how we see ourselves in the world?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what makes Levinas so interesting. He doesn't just want us to think about this stuff abstractly. He wants us to see how it's woven into the fabric of our lives.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, he says one way is through our senses, through experiencing things like, oh, I don't know, a delicious meal.
Now you're speaking my language.
Right. Who doesn't love a good meal? But Levinas would say those moments of pure enjoyment, when you're really savoring something delicious, they actually tell us something crucial about who we are.
Okay, I'm listening. I haven't really thought about my dinner philosophically before.
Well, Levinas would say it's not just about satisfying a physical need. It's about feeling a sense of belonging, of feeling at home in the world.
It's like that feeling of complete contentment you get when you're with loved ones, having a delicious meal. You're just not present.
Exactly. But, and here's the thing, Levinas says even in those moments of deep contentment, we're reminded that we're connected to something outside of ourselves. The food we eat, the people around us, this world we're a part of, enjoyment reminds us we're dependent on something bigger than ourselves.
So even when we feel totally content, we're not really self-sufficient.
Exactly. Which brings us to the concept of need. And Levinas doesn't see need as the opposite of enjoyment, but as the foundation of it.
Never thought of it that way.
It's like you don't appreciate the feeling of being warm until you've been out in the cold, right?
Yeah, that's true.
We need that contrast. But Levinas takes it a step further. He says the experience of need and then having that need met shows this fundamental tension inside us. We're always caught between wanting to be self-sufficient and being totally dependent on the world around us. He actually calls that desire for self-sufficiency atheist separation.
Atheist separation. Wow, intense. That seems a bit extreme, doesn't it? Just wanting to handle things on your own.
I know, right? It sounds dramatic. But think about it. When we try to be totally independent, like an island unto ourselves, we miss out on what makes life meaningful. Connection. And for Levinas, recognizing our need for others, for something beyond ourselves, is what leads to a more ethical way of being in the world.
Okay, so if we're always navigating that tension, wanting to be independent but also needing others, how do we deal with that?
Well, Levinas says one way we do this is through creating what he calls a dwelling.
He's talking about our homes, right?
Yeah, but it's more than just a physical structure. It's about creating a sense of security and belonging, of being at home in the world. It's what makes a house a home, you know?
Yeah, like it's not just the roof and walls, it's the feeling you get when you're there.
Exactly. And Levinas says creating a dwelling, both literally and figuratively, is how we balance that need for separation and connection.
So we need our own space to be alone with our thoughts, but it's always within this larger world we're a part of.
Exactly. We decorate our homes, we have people over, we make them a reflection of who we are. And this act of creation, transforming a space into something that reflects ourselves.
Well, it's closely tied to the idea of labor, which is another way we bridge the gap between ourselves and the world.
Because through labor, we're interacting with the world, shaping it to fit our needs.
Yes. Think of like a carpenter. They take raw wood and turn it into something useful and beautiful. For Levinas, that act of creation, that's ethical engagement with the world.
But isn't there a danger in that? Like we talked about how totality is about imposing our will on the world.
That's a really good point. And Levinas would agree. He's not saying it's about dominating nature. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, understanding that we're always working within a larger context, always in relation to something beyond ourselves.
So it's about finding that balance again. We have the power to shape the world, but we also need to respect it.
Exactly. It's less about trying to be a master over everything and more about collaboration. True creation needs that openness to the unexpected. That makes me think about baking bread. It's never just about following a recipe, right? It's about feeling the dough, adjusting to how humid it is. It's almost like having a conversation with the ingredients.
I love that. And it really highlights something crucial about Levinas. He sees this ethical dimension bake into everything, not just big moral decisions, but in those everyday interactions we have with the world, recognizing the otherness, whether it's a person we pass on the street, a piece of art that moves us, even in the bread we bake.
Which brings us back to this idea of infinity. We encounter it in other people, but it sounds like Levinas is also saying we can find it in everyday experiences, like making a home, working with our hands.
You got it. For Levinas, the infinite isn't this far-off concept. It's part of life.
Okay, I'm ready to explore this idea of infinity a bit more. Like, How does it shape how Levinas understands time? It feels like we've been circling around that idea.
You're right, it's a fascinating aspect of his thinking. Levinas challenges that typical way we see time as this straight line, past, present, future, and he gives us a different perspective.
All right, then, let's unravel this idea of time a bit more.
Let's do it.
All right, so we're tackling Levinas' view of time, and something tells me we're not talking about just, checking our watches here.
You got that right. This is Levinas. We got to go big.
Okay, then hit me with it. How does he see time?
Well, he'd say this idea of time as this straight line, past, present, future, that's just another way of trying to contain it, control it, another form of totality.
Which he wasn't a fan of.
Exactly. Levinas saw so much more to it, so much possibility.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what's his take then? If it's not a straight line, what is it?
Picture this. Standing on a beach, watching the waves crash. Each wave is connected to the one before it, but it's also different, unpredictable.
I like that imagery.
He captures that sense of both continuity and rupture, and that's how Levinas saw time.
Continuity and rupture. Okay, I think I'm getting it, but give me a real-life example of how that works in time.
Think about those major life events, right? Like having a child, or maybe starting a new career, or even experiencing a big loss.
Those are definitely moments that change you.
For sure. And they change how you experience time, too. Because those events come out of your past, but they also create a break from it. You're not the same person you were before.
So each moment isn't just determined by the past. It's also a chance to, break free, create something new.
Exactly. You got it. And Levinas was really interested in this idea of creating something new, especially when it comes to fatherhood.
All right, bring on the fatherhood connection. How does that fit in with all of this?
Okay, so think about it. You have a child, right? That child,
Yeah.
they're part of you, your family, your history.
Genetically speaking, for sure.
Right. They embody this continuity of your life, but at the same time, they're also this completely new, unique person. They're this potential for something totally new to exist.
It's like, as a parent, you're part of this incredible back and forth between your own finite life, your own limits, and then these infinite possibilities in your kid.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And Levinas says that this act, this bringing something new into the world that's going to keep going even after we're gone, that's ethical responsibility.
Because it's acknowledging the future as something we contribute to but can't control.
Exactly. We can't control it, but we're still part of it.
It's like handing off the baton in a relay race, trusting that the next runner will take it and run in ways we can't even imagine.
And that trust, that's so important. Because, as Levinas reminds us, we're not just these separate beings moving along this timeline. We can go beyond our own limits, create something that lasts way beyond ourselves.
This has been a lot to take in, but in a good way. I think what I'm hearing is that Levinas really wants us to pay attention, to notice the otherness all around us, in people, art, even in something as simple as enjoying a meal.
And to be open to it. Because in that openness, that willingness to look beyond just ourselves, maybe, just maybe, we can catch a glimpse of that infinity he was talking about.
It's definitely a challenge. But maybe that's why Levinas is still so important. He's asking us to think bigger, to really see the world and our place in it.
He is. And that's something worth thinking about, don't you think?
100%. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. But before we go, we want to leave you with one last thought from Levinas. The face is a command. Let that sink in for a bit.
And until next time, keep questioning, exploring, and those philosophical wheels turning.